And there it is. Cool. Okay, so charter commissioners, you are being recorded. Just so you know, folks who are watching this meeting, thanks for joining us. We're glad that you're here. You're going to have limited ability to interact with us this evening, but we're really glad that you're here to observe. I see some county staff out there in the audience. Thanks for joining us, y'all, on a Tuesday evening. Okay. Most folks in here are muted with your videos on. Perfect. I'd invite you to have your videos on during this meeting. I also know that some of you may be joining from the car. You may have kids, you may have pets, you may have life going on in the background. If that's the case, just let us know. Or if you need to turn your video off, just give us a heads up. But it is lovely to see your faces, especially as we get to know each other. And that's really what we're going to be doing for a lot of our meeting is hearing from each other and doing a pretty robust round of introductions. I know that when I'm on Zoom, the temptation to do other things, especially other work, is very, very real. And I'd encourage you, if you need to do something with your hands, whether that's doodling or knitting or, petting your dog, that's great. If you can close the emails, maybe turn our phones upside down so that we're not looking at them, to keep multitasking to a minimum, that'll help us remain present to each other and to our conversation this evening. But again, life happens. So if you do have to pop off screen, just let us know if you have to step away for a second. While everyone's here, if you can open up the chat box, we are going to be using the chat for committee members this evening. If you can change the settings to everyone. So in that bottom box, it'll say hosts and panelists to everyone or to hosts and panelists. If you can change it to everyone, that'll ensure that everybody who is observing our meeting this evening is also able to follow along with the chat. If you do send a message, you are welcome to send a message to myself or to county staff. We've got Kali and Danny on either side of me on the Zoom screen who can help you out if you're having any issues. But just know that all of our messages will be part of the official public record for this evening. So it's like when you're in school and you're passing notes, like we're totally going to catch you passing notes to each other. So just know it's part of the record. I know Mark is joining on a phone. If you're not able to see the chat or that's really challenging to kind of toggle between your video screen and the chat, don't worry about it. I will elevate any comments in the chat that are relevant to our conversation and say them out loud verbally for folks. So, or also if like chat's super distracting for you, just close it. Don't need to worry about it. I'll take care of it for you. It's an option for our communication this evening. We do have live transcripts enabled as well. If you'd like to use that, that can be found on the bottom ribbon of your screen. If it's really annoying to watch the live transcripts and they've automatically popped up, you can click live transcript and hide subtitle, and that will get rid of that. If you'd like to see live transcripts, you can click the same button, live transcript, and show subtitle, and that'll do a probably imperfect, like computer bot version of transcripts, but at least something that may help you follow along if that's helpful. Okay, I think that's all my housekeeping pieces. Again, if you just joined us and you'd like to rename yourself with your pronouns and your name, that's great. And we'll also get to that when we get to our introductions. But I think that's all the boring stuff. So with that, I think for our official welcome, I'm going to pass it to Chair Deborah Kafoury. Chair, over to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I am your Multnomah County Chair, Deborah Kafoury. And I'm really excited to be here tonight. I only wish, and I know doesn't everybody say that at the beginning of every Zoom call, but I mean this time. I really wish that we could be together in person to kick off tonight's meeting, but for now we're going to have to deal with these virtual gatherings. I just wanted to be here for a few minutes to express and to share with you how important I feel that the job that you're doing is, and to thank you for volunteering. The county charter is our most important governing document. It sets the foundation for how Multnomah County serves our community. It's where you can find out about what the county, or about why the county offers the services it does, the form of government that we use, because it's different from some of the other counties. You can find out who oversees what and the requirements folks have to meet to become an elected official. It is really a monumentous task that you've undertaken, not to scare you away, be excited about it, but reviewing this document thoroughly and then recommending changes to the vote for the voters to consider is a daunting task. And I just want it to be clear how profoundly meaningful your work will be, not just because it can have lasting implications on how the county operates, but because it reflects our recognition as a community that we can always improve and that we can always do more to ensure that Multnomah County works for all of its residents equitably. This group of you on this call tonight has been brought together to take on this body of work. And I have reviewed each of your applications, and I just want to express how grateful and lucky that we are to have to build a community committee that brings such diverse experiences, incredible smarts, and most importantly, a deep care and concern for our community. I appreciate each and every one of you for choosing to give your time and energy to serve on our Charter Review Committee. And I look forward to hearing about the areas that you are focusing on. I hope and I think and I know that we've put together a strong internal county support team for you all, and I encourage you to ask questions throughout the process, especially when it comes to issues of equity and accessibility. This last year and a half has stretched us all in ways that we couldn't have imagined, and it speaks volumes about your dedication to your neighbors and to our community, that you are, of all the places that you could be, here with us to be part of this work. And I won't take any more time of your meeting today. I'll hand it back to Allison, but I obviously I'm going to say this again for like third time tonight, and I'll say it throughout this this time that we have in the next few months together. But thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of the Charter Review Committee and for allowing me to drop in for a few minutes to express my gratitude. And also at any time during this process, feel free to reach out to me, any of my staff. I've been through this a couple of times now, and it's fascinating. There's a lot to do. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Chair, for joining us. We're glad that you're here. I also wish that we were meeting in person, but really appreciate you all being here. And hopefully you're like cozy. Is that like early fall in Portland vibe this evening? So I should have said this at the top, but my name is Allison Brown, and I am a facilitator with JLA Public Involvement. I'm working with the county to support this. So my role here is to be your facilitator, which means that for like this meeting and probably our next meeting, I might really be like steering the ship, sort of say, and helping to move our agenda along. But really my goal here is to ensure that you have a lot of space to speak and to interact with each other. And we'll talk more about what that looks like when we get to the second half of our agenda. So our agenda for this evening is really split into two parts. The first part is we're going to talk to each other. We're going to spend some time going around and inviting each of you to introduce yourselves. So we'll get to that in a second, but it'll just be like, tell us your name, tell us what your day job is, or like what you do, and I'll let you decide how you want to define that. If you want to say like what your job is, that's great. If you want to say like how you really love spending your time, that's okay too. I'm also going to ask you to let us know where in Multnomah County you are joining us from today. I think we represent diversity of opinions and perspectives, but also geographic diversity. So it'd be great to know where in the county you are joining us from today, and then also the lenses or values that you are bringing to this work. So we know that there'll be different things that are important to each of you as you approach, as Chair Kafoury said, the important work of reviewing Multnomah County's charter. So just tell us a little bit about that. We're also going to practice the fine art of brevity. So that's a lot of information to convey, but I'm going to ask you to keep it relatively short so that we can hear from everyone, maybe 2 to 3 minutes. And if you're maybe getting a little, long-winded or going off on a tangent, I'll give you a gentle reminder to start to wrap it up. But that'll help keep us on time and on track for the first part of our meeting. We'll take a short break around 7 o'clock, and then we'll come back and we'll pass it over to county staff to tell us a little bit about the process overall. So some background on the county's governance structure, what charter review means. I know a lot of you have gotten some of that information already through your application process, but for everyone here, we're going to talk a little bit about what charter review means. We're going to have a little bit of a sort of the legal portion of the evening from Catherine from the county attorney's office. And then we're going to close it out this evening and talk a little bit about our next steps. My goal is to make sure that we are ending no later than 8 o'clock, because 8 o'clock is quite late for all of you and we have school and work tomorrow. So I'm going to keep us on time this evening. And that's my promise to you. My colleague Ariella Frischberg is here as well. She'll introduce herself in a minute, but she's here taking notes. And so in addition to the meeting recording, we're going to be developing a meeting summary. So if somebody was not able to make the meeting, or in the future, if you're not able to make it to a meeting, we're going to be able to give you a short summary of our meeting so you can know kind of the highlights and key points of what you missed. And if you want to watch like a 2-hour recording, super cool, but you don't have to. So with that, let's get into our introductions and hear a little bit more about all of you. Staff are going to participate in this as well. So what I'm going to do is just call you in the order that I see you on my screen. I'm also going to put your names into the chat so you'll know kind of what the next group of 3 or 4 people are, so you can get ready. If you get nervous speaking in front of a big group, that's okay. It happens. We can work through it, and I'm happy to give you reminders if you forget what you're supposed to be talking about. I'll also put that in the chat. And if you love speaking in front of people, I'll help cut you off if you need to be cut off a little bit. So just to get us started, again, it is your name. Tell us what your day job is, or how you love to spend your time, where in the county you're joining us from, and the lenses or values that you bring to this work. So what's really, really important to you as you approach charter review. And with that, I'm going to actually have Callie and Danny start us off. They're on either side of me. So why don't we start with Callie?
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Callie Odell, and my position with the county is as the Charter Review Committee's program coordinator. So my entire role with the county is meant to support this committee's work and make sure that our process is running along as smoothly as possible. And so you'll interact with me a lot throughout this process. I'm kind of your go-to staff person anytime you have questions or concerns or want to talk through any part of your experience with the committee. And you've heard a lot from me already, so that's only going to continue throughout this process. I guess a little bit of background about me. First, I'll say my pronouns, as I've written out in Zoom, I use she, her pronouns. And my background is in education. I've worked in higher education for, I don't know, the past like 8 or 9 years before joining the county. And so I guess that's a lens that I bring to this process as an educator, thinking a lot about how we can get everyone kind of the best information, make sure that everybody feels included and heard throughout this whole process. That applies to committee members and also to the public. And so making sure that, that's an important framework that I'm bringing as somebody who's supporting all of you. And let's see, I grew up in Portland. So Multnomah County, I consider my home county. I lived a number of other places for several years after I went to college and graduated. And so I am newly returned and kind of relearning the county from a perspective as an adult and somebody who can actually vote here now. So so I'm excited to work with all of you. In terms of where I am in the county too, I think we said I would share. I am in Northeast Portland in the Elliott neighborhood, so kind of over by Alberta Street area, and that's where I live. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Danny.
Awesome. Well, hi everyone. I'm Danny Bernstein. I use they them pronouns. I'm the director for the Office of Community Involvement, and I'm just so excited to be here with you all. In my role in the office, I've been probably planning for the Charter Review Committee for about 2 years now. So I've been kind of looking ahead to this September 2021 meeting for a long time, and I'm just really excited that it's finally here and I get to share virtual space with you all. And I'm really here just to be kind of another staff support for the committee and to be another resource. I know I had the pleasure of interacting with a lot of you during the application process. And so, in terms of what I bring to the work, I think the kind of common thread with all of the work that I've done over the years is that I really enjoy opportunities to help build community capacity and community leadership. I got my start doing organizing on LGBTQ issues, particularly around marriage equality, and working kind of campaigns to try and either fight anti-LGBT legislation or get it passed. And what I found that I most enjoyed in that work was really the opportunities to just train and support volunteers to have an impact on the issues they cared about and feel confident and empowered to be able to really advocate for themselves and their communities, and feel really lucky now that I get to do that kind of sitting in local government and to support people to engage. Most of my work through the office is to get folks connected to opportunities to be providing input to our county leaders and really impacting county decisions. And this is my first charter review committee process, so really excited to kind of learn alongside you all and from you kind of as we work our way through this. And I am in North Portland in the Canton neighborhood. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Kali, I've also mispronounced your name. I apologize. I had it in my brain, like, which one was it? So for anyone, if I mispronounce your name, please let me know. You can also send me a message in the chats. I want to make sure I'm getting it right. So next up, let's go to Maya, then Teresa, and then Georgina.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Maya. It's spelled with a J, but it's pronounced like a Y. My pronouns are she and her, and I live in Northwest Portland. I was born and raised in southern Sweden. My heritage is Swedish, Estonian, and Latvian. That's my grandparents were immigrants from Estonia and Latvia. I've lived and worked in 4 different countries. I've lived in Sweden, in Chile, Brazil, and the United States. And in the United States, I've lived on both coasts as well as in the Midwest for several years. I'm a journalist by trade, spent quite a few years in government policy, and now I'm mainly in the nonprofit sector. I'm a director of a foundation called the Hormel Harris Foundation. In terms of what I like to do with my time, I love to be with my friends and family. Family is pretty much, you know, the people I hang with these days and during the pandemic, and I enjoy that. I love animals. I love the ocean. I grew up on an island in Sweden, so being close to the water makes me feel at home. In terms of my lens, it's hard to kind of categorize, but I think just being willing to look at things from different angles. I think one of the things I've learned living in different places is that there are lots of ways to do things and lots of ways to achieve the same outcome. So I try to be flexible in my mindset, and also try to be curious about how the world works and how other people experience it differently than I do. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Maya. Teresa, let's go to you next.
Hi everyone, my name is Teresa. I go by she, her pronouns. Currently, I'm finishing my last year at Oregon State University, so that's exciting for me. Yeah, I see that, Jude. Yay! I'm majoring in public policy, but I do spend a lot of time commuting between Portland and Corvallis. So typically, I would be in the Centennial neighborhood in Portland, so that's really southeast like as southeast Portland as you can get, honestly. But outside of school and everything, I love to go hiking. I recently went to Ecola State Park, which was absolutely beautiful. I also love annoying our family chihuahua who hates me on the side too. It's okay. And I also love like reading and podcasts and stuff like that. And in terms of the committee, I think for me, it's just seeing the space as it is and how it could be a space for collaboration. Because for me, if you know me, I really don't like to talk. I really love to listen to people and the stories they bring and how we can work together on that as well. So in tandem with that, I also love really getting to the nitty gritty of things and understand, okay, what is going on right now? How is it working? And how can we make it better? So those are 2 things that I have in mind, and it's great to see everyone here too.
Thanks, Teresa. Let's go to Georgina next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Georgina Miltenberger. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Southwest Portland. I'm originally from the East Coast. I'm from Virginia, but my husband and I moved here in 2003. I am an attorney. I don't practice law anymore, but I practiced family law for over a decade. I now work for a firm that's based in New York, actually, called Eagle Bay Advisors, and I do work on their multifamily office services side. I have two children who go to OES, and I was really excited to see a fellow aardvark, Donovan. It's really nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you. So I'm excited about this work because, I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Virginia, but my kids were born and raised in Multnomah County. This is truly their home, the only home they've known. And so it's personal, it matters on a very personal level, how things are run. And just as a community member, I enjoy this level of engagement and volunteer work. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Georgina. Let's go to Jude and then Ana Gonzalez up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jude Perez. I use they, them pronouns. I live in Southeast Portland. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, but I've been living here for about like 7-8 years now. I'm the grants manager at an organization called Seeding Justice, which does grant making that funds organizing for social justice issues here in Oregon. And I guess on a personal level, I like to roller skate and play video games, and I hang out with like my cat and my dog. My cat might show up on screen maybe, and y'all might see his orange fur. When I was younger, I started off doing LGBTQ activism and immigration activism, and then I worked at the community cycling center here, and that kind of got me really interested in transportation and urban planning. So that's kind of what I'm like really geeky about. And also working in grant making, I get to like read and learn about a lot of the issues that are happening around Oregon. So I'm hoping that I can bring that to the committee. I think I hit everything, yeah.
You did great. Thanks, Jude. Okay, Ana, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ana Gonzalez Muñoz. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I'm originally from Mexico, Zacatecas, raised in South Central LA, but I've been living in Oregon for the past maybe 27, 28 years, mainly in the Marion and Polk County areas, and recently here in Multnomah County. I currently live in Fairview, Oregon, so the real East County area. And so representing here, I work for Latino Network. I've been there for 7 years. Currently, I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Leadership Development. And that work consists of mainly organizing the community to make sure that their voice are heard and represented in the different issues that affect them throughout, their experience in East County. I also lead our grassroots leadership development program, Líderes, and currently I'm about to implement a leadership program within the PPS middle school programs that is student organizing for leadership. In my spare time, I like to just relax and have free work time, be able to just enjoy myself with my husband, and of course a little tequila shot here and there. I love that. So thank you, and I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Ana. Okay, Mikelo?
Yeah, Nicola Cabbage, perfect, pretty close. Yeah, my name's Nicola Cabbage. I live in Northeast Gresham, kind of by Mount Hood Community College. I'm basically just a young kid who's interested in like politics and public policy. And in terms of like experience, I'm doing a lot of like public safety and juvenile justice work right now. In the past, I've done some like healthcare policy lobbying on the state level. And yeah, like right now I'm just focused on whatever City Hall is focused on. So right now it's a lot of gun violence and homelessness issues. But yeah, I'm just really looking forward to working with everyone and connecting with everyone and recommending stuff to the public. Yeah, I'm excited for this work that we're doing.
Thanks. Let's go to Annie next.
Hi, my name is Annie Kalin, and sometimes I get a little bit of stage fright, so I'm sorry if I get a little bit nervous. My pronouns are she, her. I live in East Portland, outer East Portland. I tend to kind of make a distinction there. And I work for a renewable energy company. I'm also the chair of the Equal Vote Coalition, which advocates for better voting methods. And that's kind of one of my main interests in terms of, you know, government and how we run things. Let's see. The lens, you know, that's kind of a difficult thing, I think, to define. Well, especially since I'm kind of one of these people that's, you know, jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing, where I kind of dabble in a lot of different things because I have a lot of different interests. And so, you know, I think what I bring is kind of just a diversity of experiences and skills. So, you know, I'm just excited to hear what you know, what I can learn from other people through this process, because I don't know much about how our county is run right now. So I think it's a great learning opportunity, and I'm really excited to see what everybody else's perspectives and knowledge here is, because I think combined we can really make a big difference. So I don't know if that was what you were looking for, but there you go.
That was perfect, Annie. Thank you. Okay, Jerisha.
Hi, I'm Dre-isha. I go by Jay, she, her pronouns. Born and raised Portlander. As of last month, I now live in St. John's, but formerly Park Rose for 15 years. My 9 to 5, I'm a civil design engineer, managing wastewater capital assets for the city of Portland. What lens I bring? A couple. I have an environmental justice lens. My spare time, I'm the NAACP's environmental justice chair. I also have an education and STEM advocacy lens. I am the president-elect for the National Society of Black Engineers that I founded in Portland. And I also am a Black Portlander. So my lens is to get Black folks civically engaged. So that means outreach and education, and however transparent we can be in that process. So I think I covered all the questions.
Sure did. Thanks. Let's go to Donovan and then Teamer.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, cool. Yeah, my name is Donovan. I use he, him, his pronouns. My day job right now is the communications manager for Community Alliance of Tenants. We're a statewide tenants' rights organization. And I'm already losing the questions. I've been sitting here looking at them so I don't forget. What do I do with my time? I give it to you all the time, so I don't have any for myself. That's what I do. But yeah, I am the second VP at the NAACP. So I spend a lot of time working on issues around policing, work on issues regarding civics in general, Black folks engagement, and just generally trying to get our folks into a better place. I am definitely an aardvark. Gang. I went to Oregon Episcopal School for middle and high school. So, and I continue to engage over there too, working on their inclusion committee and alumni committee before that. And yeah, I think that's actually a big part of my lens, is somebody who was, you know, born and raised in the city, 4 generations deep in Oregon, and somebody who's seen everything from the suburbs to the city to Northeast Portland and has family ties up and down the Northwest. And so I think just witnessing, living through all of those things makes me the person that I am. I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I am a speaker, and I produce events. All of those things are focused on, lifting up history and trying to shape a different future for us collectively, but Black folks first. Yeah, thank y'all.
Thanks, Donovan. Let's go to Timur and then Nina.
Hi, good evening. Pleasure to join y'all. My name is Timur Ender, and I use he, him pronouns. And professionally, I manage infrastructure projects for the city of Portland, applying our city policies to things like paving.
Uh-oh. I think Timur is frozen. Yep, Teresa, thank you for nodding that he's not just frozen for me, he's also frozen for you. Okay, it's really, really frozen. So let's go to Nina and then we'll come back to Timur when he's back online.
All right. Hi, everybody. This is so lovely. My name is Nina Kanjan. I use she, her is what I go by. I live in the North Portland area right now. I think I've lived in almost every neighborhood in Portland. And East County, definitely East County. I'm an East County girl. I've been working in East County the last 12 years now. That's why I'm here. I'm a special education teacher for Reynolds School District. I wear many hats at Reynolds High School right now. I am, oh gosh, I'm sitting on the executive council for the REA union right now. I'm also the swim coach. I also started well, I shouldn't say I started it. My student started it. One of the most amazing students I've ever worked with. The first Islamic student union for Reynolds High School. And I don't know if there's another one in Portland, but that's kind of how I started my activism, was when I was in high school after 9/11. I'm Muslim, I'm Iranian. So I worked as the youth representative for the Islamic Educational Center of Orange County when I started in high school, and I did a lot of work with Sayyid Mustafa al-Ghazwini. I did interviews, we did tours, we ran interfaith panels, we did a lot of things. We ran a youth group every Friday night for Muslim youth. That's a long, long time ago though. Sorry, that's like old stuff I did. But it kind of motivated me for the work. That kind of motivated me for what I do now. So I love my students. I love my district. I want things to be better. I think things can be much better. And I want to be a part of that. So I feel like we are very close to it, and we have a few steps further to go. But I think that the mindset is there, and you all beautiful people here are doing great work. I'm amazed by what y'all are doing in the community. So thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. And I think I answered all the questions, but I'm not 100% sure. My lenses are, first generation child of immigrants, Iranian woman, brown woman, whatever, like all that stuff. I just think that, what I'm here for and what I'm always here for is equity in practice, not on paper. So I'm not about writing about equity. I'm about doing equity. I'm about being equity. So I want to come up with strategies to implement equitable ideas. We've done it in East County in many different venues. We got Latino Network here. I know Ana del Rocio, you guys, everybody from over here is doing great work, and I'm so excited to be connected with you, and I'm so excited to make change happen. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Nina. Timur, are you back?
Back. Yeah, sorry about that. I think I had Wi-Fi.
No worries. Let's pass it back to you. Go for it.
Okay, yeah, I think I was just basically saying I'm joining from 117th and Stark, and then I'm on the board of Oregon Walks, which is the state's basically pedestrian advocacy organization, advocating for pedestrian safety, and everyone who's walking and rolling on public streets and traffic safety. Lenses that I bring would be transportation justice, climate justice. I just spent 3 years on the Multnomah County Public Health Advisory Board. So I kind of feel like I got a ad hoc like graduate degree in public health. So that was really nice. And then basically disparities in access and government funding and disparities in the built environment. And then I guess the other two lenses are kind of related to my formal education, which is criminology and sociology, and then law. So those are kind of my lenses, and just really excited to be here and be here with everyone here.
Thanks so much, Timur. Let's continue with Danica, and then Mark, and then Samantha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danica Liang. I use she, her pronouns. I live on the western end of Multnomah County near Forest Park, the border of Washington County. And I'm currently a high school senior at Portland Public Schools. For me, my lenses are pretty much very much based in the work I've been doing for the past couple of years, which has primarily been racial equity focused, reproductive justice focused, voting rights focused. And I've worked with a multitude of organizations, including Planned Parenthood, Oregon Chinese Coalition, Next Up, to basically help try to implement a lot of the equitable ideas that we've discussed a lot today. Currently, I'm an intern with Representative Maxine Dexter. We've been working on getting redistricting wrapped up, as well as the DEQ, or sorry, the Portland Department of Environmental Quality are rejecting Zenith Energy Oil's terminals permit. And so for me, it's really important that bringing that climate focused, youth focused, equitable lens is key, and as well as authenticity when we're doing this work.
Thanks, Danica. Let's go to Mark.
Okay, how's that?
That's great. We can hear you.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Gonzalez. I live in the Irvington area in Portland. I have been living here for 36 years. I was born in Portland, and I've lived in all three of the counties that surround Portland. I attended Jesuit High School and graduated from Portland State, and then also went on to the Oregon Executive MBA program. I had a long career in government with Clackamas County. I served many years, 20 plus years, as finance director at Clackamas County. And my experience in county government is what created the interest for me in joining this group. I've served multiple terms as a Multnomah County citizen volunteer with the Citizens Investment Advisory Group. And that works with the county treasurer for county investments and taking the ready cash and making it work for the county. My primary lens, thus, is because I worked in county government for so long, I was interested in the structure of Multnomah County and how to work within that and see what kind of change that's necessary that we can affect as a group. I also, as Annie said, I'm really interested in learning more about the way the county works and what we can do to make it better. I have served on a number of public and private boards. Currently, I serve on the Make Music Day board, which is a board that puts on a one-day music festival every year at the end of June. I'm an amateur musician, and I just really enjoyed Portland, having lived here all my life, pretty much. Beyond that, I don't really have anything to add, I don't think.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Let's continue with Samantha, and then we'll go to Ana and Rocio.
Hi, y'all. I'm so excited to meet you. My name is Samantha Gladue. I use they and she pronouns. I am in Southeast Portland, Multnomah County, inner Southeast, recently moved back to here from Northeast, Madison South neighborhood. And in my day job, I'm the Technical Assistance Director / Organizational Development Director at the National Network of Abortion Funds, which is a membership organization of nearly 90 autonomous organizations that work in community to overcome financial and logistical barriers to abortion access. And prior to that, I was the Executive Director of Next Up and Next Up Action Fund, formerly known as the BUS Project. And my analysis is really rooted in dismantling barriers and structures that aren't working so that we can rebuild things and bring people in who have been too often sidelined and left out. And to me, that is really a value of racial justice as being the most important, most pressing issue of our time, and really, seeking to center at the front voices of Black, Indigenous, people of color, young people, women, LGBTQ people, trans and non-binary people. And as like what I do for fun, peace, like Mark, I'm an amateur musician. I play bass in punk bands, and I have a dog who I think loves me and a spouse, and just love hanging out in the neighborhood, seeing what everyone is up to. And I'm so pumped to get to meet all of you and to work with you so closely on this project.
Samantha. All right, Anna, over to you.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. My name is Ana del Rocio. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. In my day job, I run a local nonprofit called Oregon Futures Lab. But really, mostly what I do is I'm a parent of two little ones. They're 6 and 9 years old. I live in Southeast Portland, so District 3 in the county. I share the lenses that many of y'all are already bringing, environmental and racial justice, really reproductive justice as well. I really represent the parent and caregiver, lived experience, and especially in pandemic times, that being at the forefront of a lot of folks' minds and needs for additional support and resourcing. And then beyond that, I also bring a lens of truth and reconciliation, having worked within the county and been around many forms of county service and county leadership. I know we've actually come a long way. We're actually doing a lot when it comes to moving towards justice frameworks. What we're missing, I think, is truth and reconciliation, right? And that to me looks like really creating spaces to listen and center Black and Indigenous, women, femme, non-binary, and gender nonconforming folks of color with disabilities on what it means to move forward in integrity as governments and to reduce harm, and how we're setting up the structures for leadership to come at the county.
Thank you, Anna. All right, let's continue with Catherine and then Ariella.
Hey everybody, my name is Catherine Thomas and I'm an assistant county attorney at Multnomah County. I use she, her pronouns. I represent a number of different departments at the county in my role as an assistant county attorney. So our land use planning division, our elections division, government relations, sustainability, some of our special districts, and then I also help out with some of our appellate work. I was involved at the very end of the last charter review process. So this is a little bit of my first experience taking this process from start to finish. So I'm excited to work with all of you. I'll be planning to attend these large meetings, and then we'll see with subcommittee meetings, should you have those, what involvement I might have there. But the lens and my role here really is not only to help sort of in making sure in these meetings that we're complying with legal requirements, but also providing legal analysis and feedback as you all bring forward thoughts and proposals in terms of what any legal issues with those proposals might be. And so really just serving as a legal advisor for the committee to that end, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but if you have questions for me specifically, I'm going to ask that you route those through your staff contacts, and then they can kind of help compile and bring those to me and share answers back with the whole group, because likely if one of you has a question, more than one of you has the same question. So but really want to be a resource for you as legal questions might arise around the work that you're doing here. And then in terms of where I am in the county, I grew up in Northeast Portland and have lived also in Northwest and Southeast, and now I am in South Portland on the South Waterfront. So in that area.
Thanks, Catherine. Ariella, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ariella Frischberg. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a coordinator with JLA Public Involvement. So I am really here to provide facilitation support. If you have any issues with Zoom and things like that, I'm happy to answer questions along those lines. I grew up in Portland. I grew up in Eastmoreland and then went to school in Northeast Portland. And I'm an alum of also of the PSU MBA program. And just bought a house, our first house, my best friend and I purchased in Southeast Portland, 82nd and Powell area. So very excited to be doing this work with you all. And I have a background in nonprofit advocacy work. So I was doing domestic violence and sexual assault prevention and crisis work before coming to JLA.
Ariella. And I'll finish this up here with a little bit more of an introduction. My internet may also be unstable, so please wave me down if I am freezing or sounding like a robot. But Allison Brown, facilitator with JLA Public Involvement. I am joining you from beautiful Brentwood, Darlington in Southeast Portland this evening. Almost Clackamas County, but not quite, still in Multnomah County. My background is in peace and reconciliation. So I'm originally from Hawaii. I lived for a number of years in Mexico. And most recently, before coming to Oregon, lived in Northern Ireland, where I did peace and reconciliation work. So Ana del Rocio, your words on truth and reconciliation. I love that. It's my language. I worked with Catholic and Protestant communities and did program facilitation and design centered around reconciliation and peace building, kind of in post-conflict Northern Ireland. I moved to Oregon 5 years ago, almost 6. So I am one of those people who is coming in, but love being in the Northwest and love that I am still pretty close to shark infested waters, so I can shred and surf like I do in Hawaii, out here on the Oregon coast. And in this work as a facilitator, one of the things I hope to always bring to these spaces is the experience of radical welcome. It's really meeting people where they're at and creating a space that feels welcoming for all participants. So we'll hold a little bit of space at the end of tonight's meeting just to see what worked and what didn't work. I know that we've been doing Zoom for a really long time, but also it's still relatively new and there are lots of ways to learn, and certainly as a facilitator to make sure that we're holding space for people and meeting their needs. Certainly if there's something that like, hey, Allison, you do this thing, and if you just changed it, it would really, really help me engage, or here are some other ideas I have from other things that I do, or could we try this? Please reach out. You can do that by getting in touch with county staff, with Kali, and getting that, and that message will get through to me, or just reach out to me directly. And I'll make sure that you have my contact information, because I do hope that everyone here can feel welcomed and feel that this is a space that you can engage in. And if that means it doesn't look like a totally traditional meeting, I think that we can find out ways to work around that and to hold space together so that it's working for the next year. So that's me. I'm so excited and thrilled to be with you. Y'all are impressive. Just saying, it's really, I'm struck by the number of you who said, who valued learning from each other. And I think that that might be something that is a red thread throughout this experience of learning from your different experiences. You are all intersectional beings that bring a range of things to the table, and being able to learn from each other and hold space for that is really pretty special. So I'm thrilled to be here with everyone. And governance, man, it is so boring and also so exciting. And as Chair Kafuri said, like really critical to seeing meaningful outcomes. So it is impressive just to hear your stories and your motivations for being here. Even if you just described yourself, Miguel, I'm thinking of you, you're not just somebody who's into politics, it's more than that. It's you know, it's kind of special. So did I miss anyone? No, nobody snuck off the Zoom screen and snuck back in. Okay. Then let's take a quick break. Let's come back at 7 o'clock. So let's take whatever that is, 8 minutes. It's 6:52 by my watch, but you can turn off your cameras. We may pause the recording really briefly, but so, you know, if you want to say hey to each other, that's cool, but we won't conduct any committee business during this time. But you can turn off your cameras, you can mute yourselves. I'll call you back in, but go do whatever you need to do. Go like pet your cats and say hello to your children, or grab your cooling dinner, and we'll come back at 7 o'clock. Okay. we go. Cool. All right, so we're going to transition into the second half of our agenda, and I'm going to pass it over to our lovely staff from the county to walk you through a couple of those more presentation-y pieces. I believe that we're going to be looking at a shared screen, so if you do want to turn your video off at this point, that's perfectly reasonable. I'll be keeping an eye on people's faces, but if you do want to turn it off because it's been a long day on Zoom, that's totally cool with me. Danny and Kali are going to walk us through some orientation to Multnomah County and to the charter process. I think we're going to ask that we hold verbal questions until the end or until kind of the natural pauses in the presentation. But if you have a question that's, really on your mind, or there's maybe an acronym that's used or something that we need to clarify, you can pop that into the chat. And let me know. I'll also be looking for digital hands, or if you have your video camera on, just wave me down with your hand if you have something that you want to say. I'll be watching you, but not in a creepy way, just in a monitoring body language way. So with that, let's transition in. I think we are going to hold time for Q&A and for discussion. So we're not just going to talk at you, I promise. We're going to come back and hear from all of you too. So get those questions in the chat. Write them down and save them, or if there's something really burning that we need to clarify before we move on, raise your hand. And over to Danny.
Okay, thanks, Allison. So I'm going to start with just a really quick 10-minute basics on Multnomah County, just to make sure we're kind of all grounded in the same knowledge of who are our county leaders and what are the types of services that the county provides in the community. And really just kind of understanding, you all are looking at this charter document that has really the high level structure and governance of our county, but really what does that document, what programs and services that are impacting the community? What are the ultimate ramifications of the discussions you all have and the decisions that you make? So I'm going to start off with just a quick pop quiz. I'm always just kind of curious about what people already know or don't know about Multnomah County and the programs and services that we provide. So I'm going to go through a few slides and going to list a local government program and ask, you can either, if you want to pop off mute and shout it out, or just put in the chat kind of a yes or a no if you think it's a program or a service of Multnomah County. So first up is elections, which I know some folks on this call are really interested in elections and voting. Is that something that Multnomah County is involved in?
Yeah.
See the chat. Yep. So we have an amazing Multnomah County Elections Division. When you get your ballot in the mail, that's sent from our county elections office. When you send it back, it goes to them, they count it. They also do some amazing work to be really proactive about registering folks to vote, making sure everybody has the access they need to get registered, to fill out a ballot, turn it in. So yeah, some great folks over there on that team. How about waters and sewers? Is that part of a county service? Nope. Yeah. So that is something that's provided by our cities. How about road maintenance? Is that something the county does? Yeah, so I feel like this is always kind of the trick question. So it's actually a yes. So obviously, right, we do have, City of Portland streets, and we've got state and federal highways. Multnomah County maintains all of the roads that are in unincorporated Multnomah County, so outside our cities. I think it's about 300 miles of road. And I saw someone also pointed out Multnomah County maintains 6 of the bridges that span the Willamette River and a bunch of the kind of smaller bridges around the county as well. How about health clinics? Is that part of Multnomah County? Yes, yeah. So really important part of what we do health and dental clinics, especially serving folks who are low income and immigrant and refugee communities as well. Can you get a marriage license in Multnomah County?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so it's actually one of the things that I really miss about working out of my office in person is our office is right on the first floor of the Multnomah building at Hawthorne and Grand. And so when pre-COVID times, I would see couples pop in and get their license and take a selfie, and it's very cute. I miss seeing that as part of my work day. Can you apply for food assistance through the county, like get help applying for SNAP? See yeses. Eligible Department of County Human Services, which can help connect folks to food assistance programs, rental assistance, provides a lot of services for seniors, folks with disabilities, veterans. And last one, Portland Police, is that part of Multnomah County?
No.
Yep. Nope. So yeah, it is part of City of Portland. Our Multnomah County Sheriff's Office does provide police services for some of our smaller cities that don't have their own police force. Well, not surprisingly, you all are a very knowledgeable bunch already, but thanks for chiming in. So I'm going to start off just kind of taking a high-level view. So this map is our lovely state of Oregon and kind of the outline of all of our counties. Multnomah County is shaded in red. So we are the smallest county in terms of geography, 465 square miles, but have the largest population of any county in the state, over 800,000 residents. And we're also home to the largest city, Portland, which is a good chunk of our county population, over 650,000 residents. And zooming in a little bit, this is a map of the county. So Portland is in blue, and our 5 other smaller cities are in gray, and then all of unincorporated Multnomah County is in green. So I think I was surprised to learn this when I started working at the county, but the county actually extends all the way into the Columbia River Gorge, and includes really urban areas in Portland, all the way out to some really rural parts of our region as well. And this slide has our county leadership. So this is our 5-person board of county commissioners that govern the county. So we have, as you met, Chair Deborah Kafori, who's elected kind of at large by voters across the county. And then we have 4 county commissioners who are each elected from one of 4 different geographic districts. They're all elected to nonpartisan offices. And this board of commissioners meets every Thursday morning. Currently it's virtual. And meetings are open to the public. They're streamed live on YouTube. So if you're ever just kind of curious and want to see what the board is up to, there's a lot of information about the county website about attending those meetings. The public's also always welcome to provide public comment at those meetings. We also are going to be voting on a new county chair next year because Chair Kafori is terming out. So have some new leadership after the next election cycle. And then we also have 3 other elected officials at the county. So we have our county auditor, Jennifer McGuirk. So her office is responsible for doing performance audits of county programs and services. So taking a look at their effectiveness and how efficient they are and making recommendations for improvements. Our county sheriff is elected, currently Mike Reese, and he's also terming out. So we'll be voting on a new county sheriff next year as well. And then our district attorney, Mike Schmidt. And this slide has just a list of some of the different types of local government programs and services. I know for me, when I started working at the county, I probably couldn't have told you much about what the city did versus the county versus we also are unique in having our weird little metro government in our region. So, generally speaking, it's not hard and fast rule, but generally the cities really provide more infrastructure, right? So water and sewer, fire and police, managing our parks, transportation. Whereas the county really is providing more of those social services and really that social safety net, especially for the most vulnerable folks in our community. And then again, we're kind of unique in our area in having our metro regional government, which covers Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties. And so across those 3 counties does a regional land use and transportation, regulating solid waste, and also managing some spaces like the zoo, the convention center, and some of our green spaces and natural areas as well. And then the next few slides, I'm just going to kind of run through some of the programs and services of the county just so you can kind of get a sense of some of the different community services that we provide. So as mentioned already, we have health and dental clinics, provide services around mental health and addiction. With the City of Portland, we share the Joint Office of Homeless Services, providing support and assistance to houseless folks in the community, providing support for seniors, folks with disabilities. Some other community-facing services include working with schools on anti-poverty work for folks who are familiar with the Sun Schools program, helping low-income folks weatherize their homes. The library program is part of the library system is part of Multnomah County. And we also collect property taxes, which is an important part of our county revenue. And as mentioned, issue marriage licenses as well. And then this is all under our sort of eclectic Department of Community Services, which houses our land use and transportation and that bridge work, elections. We also have animal services. So we have an animal shelter out in Troutdale, if anybody looking to add a furry friend to your family, if you already haven't done so during the pandemic. And then under the kind of public safety umbrella, we have our sheriff's office, which does law enforcement and oversees our jail system. Our district attorney does criminal prosecution and diversion programs. And our Department of Community Justice does parole and probation, as well as juvenile detention. And then this is my last slide. It's just kind of an organizational chart of the county. And we'll definitely make these slides available after. I know some of the font might be a little small and it's a lot to look at, but basically shows you kind of for each of our county departments, what's the number of full-time employees and how big is the budget for that department this year. So at the top of the organizational chart is the community, right, who we're ultimately accountable to and elects our county leadership. We've got our assortment of elected officials. And our chair, our county chair, currently Deborah Kafori, essentially serves as like the chief executive officer of the county. And so it's her office that is really responsible for overseeing and directing our county departments. Our largest department in terms of personnel is the health department, about 1,500 employees out of, I think we're at about 6,000 employees total countywide. And also that department typically has the largest budget right now. For this year, it's about $420 million. This particular year, the Department of County Assets, which is about halfway up on the left, actually has the largest budget, about $630 million. That's because that's the department where our capital projects live, and about half of that, actually I think over half of that amount, is just the Multnomah County Library Capital Bond. If folks may remember recently, we approved a bond to build a new flagship county library in East County, as well as make a lot of other improvements to our library system. So that's a huge chunk of that particular budget. So that's my overview. And I think, you know, it's really going to be up to you all in the next couple of meetings to decide where you really want to dive deep, but at least wanted to make sure there's a kind of a good general grounding in what the county does. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kali.
All right, well, I am certainly grateful that we are running ahead of schedule because I have a lot to say to you all, and yeah, it'll be helpful to have a little bit of extra time. Okay, so let me share my screen with you and hold on while I make sure that it's the right screen instead of a list of all your names and email addresses. All right. Okay, so for this next piece, what I'm going to talk about is a little bit more information about what the county charter is and what the Charter Review Committee does. I could talk about this for an hour, probably pretty easily. So it is going to go a little fast, and there is a lot of information to share. So hopefully we'll have time at the end to answer questions. And also, this is the beginning of this conversation just to kind of get us all on the same page about, you know, what's ahead. And so a lot of these things we'll be digging deeper into as we continue out through future meetings and through this committee process. So where I want to start is with this concept of home rule. Multnomah County is a home rule county. We have a home rule charter, and that's what we're here to talk about and think about over the next year. And so kind of understanding a little bit of the history, a very, very brief history. There's a very long document that fully goes into all of the details of the history of home rule in Oregon that you're welcome to search for online. And this is like the 2-minute version, which is basically to say that, you know, in the beginning, when counties were originally established as a form of local government in Oregon, their ability to make decisions or take action, even on local issues, was pretty limited to basically whatever the state legislator explicitly told counties that they had the power to do. The state legislator also determined what the structure of the county government looked like. And that meant that there was often slow response to local issues as, you know, counties got permission from state legislators when stuff came up around what they could do. And so it often led to kind of delays in services, which a lot of people weren't happy about. So that led to some steps kind of over time that eventually, you know, was looking to give more power and flexibility to counties And in 1958, that was led to a constitutional amendment to the Oregon State Constitution that allowed this thing called home rule, which basically gives the counties more power over things that are related to county-led issues. It gives counties the power to decide on what their form of county government looks like, how it's structured and organized, and increases the ability to self-govern and gives them implicit as well as explicit powers to county government to operate within their sphere, as long as what they decide doesn't interfere with state or federal laws. And so Multnomah County decided in 1966 to adopt a home rule charter that laid out its structure and how it would operate and all of its powers. The charter itself is a document that details the county government framework. A good way to think about it is, it's a local constitution. So it focuses on the big picture of how our governance system works, as opposed to focusing on more detailed policy issues, which the county actually makes decisions through things like ordinances. So that's a little bit of kind of a history and a broad overview of this thing that we're talking about with the county charter. In terms of what's in the county charter, there's a lot of information in there, and you'll certainly get into all of the details as you read through the charter and we really dive into the study process. But some of the basics to know about is it includes county characteristics, so the name of the county, where the boundaries are, where our seat of government is. And then the bulk of the charter itself focuses on things like what's the scope of the county's powers, what elected offices exist, so the county commissioners, the sheriff, the auditor, what are requirements to run for elected office, and what powers do elected officials and other folks who work for the county have, what county election rules exist, compensation for elected officials. And there are some like smaller details that are, that are also in there around like the establishment of our library district, information around local public improvement projects, and what we're all here to talk about, which is the charter review process, which is also homed in the charter. And the reason we have a charter review process is that, as I'm sure we can all imagine, no document or system is perfect. So our charter has it ingrained that every 6 years, we put together a community committee to study the charter and decide if there are any changes that need to be made. And members of the committee, that's all of you, come from all over the county, from all the various districts, to come together and represent different views from the committee, or from the county rather. And basically what we're here to do is spend a lot of time reviewing the charter, reading it closely, studying the different issues that are included in the charter. And then it's up to the charter committee to decide if they want to recommend any changes or amendments to the county charter. Those recommendations, if you choose to make them, will be put on the county ballot, and then it's up to voters to decide if they want to adopt amendments to the charter or if they don't want to adopt those amendments. So getting into kind of the scope of your work as the Charter Review Committee, as I mentioned, a lot of your focus is going to be on doing a comprehensive review of the charter itself. You have the power to look at it and decide you want to make really small changes. There can be some really big changes, depending on what you see the need for. You have the power to look at that in either direction. You can also decide if there are things that should be in the charter that you think should be in the charter that the voters should consider adding. And so so you'll spend a number of months ahead of us looking at that part of the work. You'll hold meetings and hearings, receive testimony, and interview witnesses, so you can hear from the public, from experts, from people who work for the county about what they would recommend you study and potentially address. And the one part that the charter does specifically say that you need to review, closely is the section on commissioners' compensation, although you aren't required to actually recommend any changes to that if you think what's in the charter is satisfactory. In terms of what we get out of this process is it's actually completely optional whether you recommend any amendments to the charter. And so I don't think we've had a charter committee convened that hasn't recommended amendments, but it's certainly possible if you think everything seems to be operating fine and want to keep things as it is and don't have any recommendations. Then you don't have to make them. But very likely there will be some amendments that you think will improve our county process. And so assuming that's the case, you'll work together to draft work together with the county attorney's office to draft language that will change the charter and that will end up on the ballot for voters to decide. Whether or not you decide to make any recommended amendments, you do have to put together a report of your findings and conclusions and any recommendations that you do make in terms of amendments and share that with the public and the Board of Commissioners. That needs to be completed 95 days before at least 95 days before the 2022 either primary or general election. Although I have a feeling that we'll probably be aiming for the general election in November. Let's see. So one thing that I did want to kind of touch on is kind of what makes a good charter in general, and thinking about how that informs what kind of recommendations you might make in this process. There's a lot of room to decide what amendments to recommend for the charter, but not everything that's a good policy recommendation or a good program actually belongs in the charter. So think about what a charter is. It's meant to establish a strong general governance structure, and some other pieces to kind of keep in mind as we go through this process is, we want to be easy to understand. We want to make sure that different pieces of the charter are consistent with each other so that when we read it, we don't find any conflicts or anything that's hard for folks to follow. It's for everybody to understand what the powers of the county is, so not just lawyers or people with legal training. And so we want to make sure that everything is clear and easy to follow for all folks. And then a really key piece of this part of the work that we're going to do is remembering that what goes into the charter should be thorough and really address it clearly what it's your intention to do in the charter, but also to be flexible. And flexibility is incredibly important because we do want the changes in the charter to properly align with your intentions and make sure that it's doing what we want it to do. But, we also can't know or anticipate and address everything in the charter that could possibly, create problems or things that might change in the future. And so it's really not possible to address every single scenario in the county charter. And for that reason, it really is important to leave things flexible enough that folks who administer programs with the county, policies with the county, have enough flexibility with the language in the charter to make adjustments based on folks' experiences and changes that maybe the county population experiences. And so just to kind of keep in mind that anything that's in the charter is stuff that we have to follow as county officials. And so, if something's not working out well or is confusing, the only way to change that is through a charter review process, which takes time and so isn't necessarily responsive to folks' needs. So that's a balance that we're looking for throughout this process, is really keeping things so that they're clear and purposeful, but also flexible enough that the folks who are working on the ground have the ability to, meet the needs and of the community and make sure that everything is carried out in a way that's going to be helpful and supportive to folks. So that gets us into the timeline ahead of us. As we're going over this work, the significant constraint that we'll feel, I think, is time. It is laid out in the charter, some of these different pieces of our timeline. So the fact that we're having our first meeting in September of 2021 today is laid out in the charter. The other piece that's laid out in the charter that's important is that if you do make any recommendations for amendments to the charter, those need to be on the ballot in 2022. That could be for the primary election or the general election, but honestly, given time constraints, it's most likely the November 2022 election. And with that in mind, there are also rules in the charter about having to submit your final recommendations at least 95 days before the election. And given constraints around when our Board of Commissioners meets and therefore needs to receive a report, and also kind of ballot deadlines, that means that our work has to end by August 4th of 2022. And so keeping that in mind, we've kind of mapped out a draft of what our progress might look like over the next 11 months. Our current plan is to meet once a month as a whole committee, although it's certainly within the power of the committee to decide to meet more often if that's something that you choose to do. We will probably also, again, depending on what the committee decides, there's also likely going to be subcommittee meetings in between these general meetings so that you can focus in smaller groups on more specific issues. But looking at our timeline and thinking ahead to the type of work that we're doing, our first several meetings are going to focus on, learning more about the county processes, getting some of the foundational information you need to move ahead. We're going to be spending some time working on your processes and procedures around how you'll move forward as a committee, what decision-making will be like. And that's a time-consuming process. So we expect that will probably take your first 3 to 4 meetings. On the other end of things, you also need to, put together a final report that you all approve of and need time to discuss. You'll also need to review draft language around any recommendations you make to changes to the charter and draft language for ballot measures too. And so, we expect you'll spend your last couple of meetings at least, working through the final logistics and any changes that need to be made to those documents. And so that means all of the in-between time is the time that you have to study the charter, to hear testimony from the public, from elected officials or other county officials, from experts, whoever you want to hear from, and as you go through this learning process to decide what areas of this charter you want to study most closely with recommendations in mind, and then actually dive into that research process. And so you'll have the space of 5 or 6 months to do that. But unfortunately, that's also only 5 or 6 meetings, which is not that many meetings. And so I want you to kind of keep that in mind just as you're going through the processes over our next few meetings of thinking about how we want to set up our meetings and run our meetings and how you want to work together as a group because it is a short amount of time. And so it's important to kind of plan ahead to think about how this work can be done strategically and effectively based on the timeline that we have. So that was really fast and a lot of information. Hopefully it's somewhat helpful in thinking ahead about what our process will look like going forward. But I'm sure you have lots of questions. And so I think we should probably have a little bit of time for some of those now if we want to open it up for that.
Sure do. Thanks, Kali. Okay. Questions. And that could be on kind of the charter specifics that Kali outlined, also kind of the broader county things, if you have county questions. Just so folks know, I have a parking lot, a bicycle rack. I don't know how many active transportation nerds are out there, but like things that we can't answer today, but were important to follow up on, I'll be tracking those on the side. And also if there, another critical piece of this is if there are things that you say, hey, I'd really like to know more about this, starting to elevate some of those topics. So a lot of stuff, questions, clarifications, desire for more knowledge, or even if you just want to like share how you're feeling. Is this scary? Are you, I mean, I heard a lot of excitement, but now that you're looking at that calendar. And we'll hold a little bit of awkward silence as you all look at each other and figure out who has the first question. Okay, there are those hands. Let's go to Ana Gonzalez, then Annie, and then Ana Rocio.
So I just want to kind of understand. So are we have to come to a consensus to agree on one charter review or one issue as a whole, or are we presenting our ideas individually?
So if I understand your question correctly, and let me know if I don't answer what you're actually asking, but you'll have the chance to kind of share as we go into this process. We'll talk more about, you know, what are the different ideas folks have that you might want to address and dive into. You'll hear from other people outside of the committee as, you know, based on what the committee decides they want in terms of input from other spaces. So there'll be space for a lot of individual input, but then as you decide, you know, as those kind of questions and thoughts surface, you will decide as a group which topics you want to tackle and focus in more on for study. And how that's been done in the past is sometimes, you know, you'll divide into subcommittees, and subcommittees will take on like 4 or 5 different topics. And then, you know, some of those go by really fast as you kind of, you know, learn more about them and think, no, we don't need to address that after all. And then anything, you know, anything that you kind of decide and how you go about deciding what you'll focus on is going to be the focus of our next several meetings as we talk about processes and procedures and, you know, what level of consensus you're requiring for each stage of the process in terms of moving ahead, whether that's a majority of folks agreeing to something or whether it's more than a majority. That's going to be up to the group to decide how you want to approach that. Does that answer your question, Anna?
Yes, thank you. That answers my question.
Thanks. Let's go to Annie next.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about the charter itself, which, you know, I printed out a copy and wrote all over it, but in terms of how we collaborate on thinking about different parts of it, is there a version of it that's like in a Word document form or like something where we could, you know, put notes on it online or something like that so that when we're collaborating, we can sort of communicate with each other about, oh, check out this passage or, you know, whatever.
So I'm going to let Catherine get into some of that more when she's talking about public meetings law, which I know if you're like me, doesn't necessarily immediately connect in your head, but will be important in terms of like the written communication back and forth with each other. But if you're looking for a Word document that you could make notes on for yourself, that's something I'm sure we can provide.
Okay.
I will look into it though.
Okay, got it.
Let's go to Anna and then Timur.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation and the history of the charter too. I was wondering if I could add to the bicycle rack something around having a very short summary of the history of recommendations that previous commissions have made, just so we have a sense of the substance and also like the magnitude of changes that have been proposed and kind of where we are in that spectrum.
So we do have that in a document that I will share in one of our future meetings. Also, if you read to the end of the charter, it does list all of the amendments and whether they passed or not. So that is in the charter, but it's not necessarily the most user-friendly version that we have. So I can send the other version out and make that publicly available as well.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Timur.
Hi, I was hoping there could be some clarification on when we submit the comments or the report to the board, just what action is the board taking? The county commissioners, is it kind of like a rubber stamp, or, and just what happens between us submitting to the board? And then I'll just highlight the other question in the chat, which was also one of my questions, which is what will deciding about the subcommittees look like?
Yeah. So the board, you're just making a report so they know what you've discussed. They don't have any involvement in the process in terms of deciding what recommendations will go before the voters or not. The recommendations you make, as long as we meet ballot deadlines and the appropriate deadlines, voters will see. And then in terms of the establishment of subcommittees, that's again up to you as a group to decide how you want to establish that. We'll certainly give kind of advice and recommendations as you go through the process of you know, what might be recommended in terms of like size of subcommittees and maybe how to divide up some of the work. But ultimately, as a group, it's up to you to kind of decide what the best process is for this group of people and for the number of tasks you identify that you want to tackle.
All right, let's go to Teresa, Georgina, Donovan, and then Mark.
So speaking of subcommittees, I remember on the timeline, it says we'll start with figuring out what the process will look like for the charter review committee, but for those subcommittees, will they start at the same time when our committee, like as a whole, start diving into the charter itself, or is that a different timeline possibly?
Yeah, so what we'll do like over our next couple of meetings is we're establishing like what are the processes and procedures for this committee. One of those questions is going to be how do what are the rules for subcommittees? So that will be part of the conversation going forward. In terms of when you start, again, it kind of depends on what works for the group and how we move forward. What we'll be talking about for future meetings is thinking about, you know, starting to read the charter as a group, but also thinking about, you know, who do we want to hear from in terms of like input from the public, from officials. Thank you, Catherine. I also noticed that you just put a helpful piece about the board in the chat. So thank you. But yeah, so it's really kind of up to you all to decide when it makes sense for the subcommittees to start meeting. If you want to form some subcommittees early to kind of start with a general process of of kind of working together as a smaller group and then kind of move forward from there, that's fine. If you want to wait until you've identified issues and want to divide up into groups based around that, that's also an option. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what feels like it will work best based on how you want to move ahead as a group.
Let's go to Georgina. Before, one thing I want to note is I feel like the answer to a lot of these questions is it's up to you. And that's true as a group. And also know that Danny, Kali, myself, like Catherine, like we're here to support that. So it's up to you. And also we'll help you get there if you tell us what you need. Because that can also be a scary thing when it's so open. Just wanted to note that, Kali. I hope that that's okay.
No, I think that's a good point. And, we will be sending out some like resources over the next, again, between the next few meetings for you all to review in terms of kind of recommendations for how a process like this might work and what kind of rules you might adopt. So not necessarily that you're all going to have to start completely from scratch, but that you will have plenty of flexibility to decide if, a certain process works for you or not.
Thanks, Colleen. Okay, Georgina and then Donovan.
So this might be one of those it's up to you questions, but I reviewed the 2016 report and the recommendations. And so obviously the substance of that report, we arrive at collaboratively, and it's based on what we all decide as a group. But is there, a primary drafter? Because that report is not an insignificant document. It's a pretty polished piece of final product. So, is that something that gets polished up by staff, or is there usually a drafter among the committee members?
Yeah, so I believe it's usually, the report itself is usually drafted by committee members, but we'll probably work with a smaller group. And this will get into some stuff that Catherine is also maybe going to discuss later. I don't know if we'll get into this much detail tonight, but probably what's going to work best, again, it does depend on what you all decide works best, but probably what will work best is to have a couple of people who are, primarily responsible for drafting, and then we'll bring drafts to the committee meetings to discuss and get everybody's input and eventual sign off.
Donovan, go ahead.
Can you hear me? Cool. This is probably another one of the up to you questions, but this year we're intersecting with the city charter process. I'm just wondering if in that timeline there's any planned out intersection with the charter process over there for the county charter to, commissioners to interact with this body. Yeah.
That's not actively planned, but if there are things that you would like to hear from their charter commission, we can talk about the possibility of having people come and talk at our meetings or vice versa. So it's possible, if you see that there's some value in that we can ask.
Fun fact, I also facilitate the City of Portland's Charter Commission. So we're not operating in a silo here. Also, Portland is a small town. So thanks for that question, Donovan. Let's go to Mark. Mark, if you're talking, you're muted. I can't see you anymore. There you are. Hello. Oh, still muted.
Thank you.
There we
Now
go.
I'm muted. I have a question about the routing of, because these are public meetings, it must generate questions from the public that's viewing. And how are their questions or their suggestions routed? Are they coming through you as staff? Or we're probably not going to receive those individually, I imagine.
So a lot of that will probably come through staff. That will be part of our processes and procedures to decide how you want to receive public input. If you want to have, like I would recommend, place a form online where people can submit comment. We can also have public comment in our meetings where people are invited to speak and give testimony. So yes, that is part of the process. And that is also one of the things that we'll establish as a group of what the best way to hear from folks is. And if there are specific parameters within the laws, Catherine will get into, that makes sense.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. I think the final hand I see is Nicolo, and then we'll transition into Catherine's piece of the agenda.
This might be another thing that Catherine might answer, but during my onboarding process, I raised the question of communicating with each other and our personal emails being open to public records requests and everything. And I was just curious how that would operate, how we would be communicating with each other if we wanted to avoid that, that sort of stuff.
That is exactly what Catherine is going to talk about. So I will let her take it away and get into all of those fun details.
Yes, dangerous to put the lawyer at the end of the night, but hopefully y'all can stay with me for this. And we usually use Google, so I am now going to attempt to share a screen with you, and we'll see how I do. Share. So, okay. You are seeing. All right.
Looks good.
Excellent. Thank you for the affirmation. This is my first time presenting in Zoom. So thank you for the perfect transition question. I am here tonight to talk about some of the new roles and responsibilities that are associated with your service with the county. Through your introductions, I learned that a lot of you are either government employees, former government employees, or have served in some government capacities. So a lot of this is probably going to be familiar for you, which is great because I really don't have time tonight to get into all the many nuances and details of these relatively complex laws. And so that's why I say here, this is really the starting point, but not the ending point for your learning on these topics. I want to give you enough information that you can sort of spot issues and know when you need to ask for more information. The general principle behind all of these rules we're going to talk about tonight is ensuring transparency and accountability in government officials. And so that's really the thing that animates all of these rules and requirements. And so hopefully that'll kind of help you as you're trying to learn and understand these rules to understand what's guiding all of them. I had planned to spend a little bit more time on government ethics, but I think given some of the questions and discussion here tonight, I'm going to, and given our time, which I'm trying to be cognizant of on my phone here, so excuse me if I look down, I think I'm going to spend a little bit less time on ethics and a little more time on records and meetings so we can make sure that we have time on those topics. Because they're complicated, if you have questions, I may be able to answer them right now. As Kali already is well versed in, I may also say, let me get back to you. So feel free to put questions up and then either I'll answer them tonight or we'll collect them and bring those answers back in our next meeting. So just really briefly starting with the topic of government ethics. As I said, for purposes of Oregon's ethics laws, there's a state law on this, as well as the county's ethics rules, you are public officials. And as I said, you may already be a public official in some other capacity in your life. But what that means is that for purposes of the Charter Review Committee, the ethics laws and our county rules apply to you as long as you're serving in this role. And these rules follow you outside of a Charter Review Committee meeting. And you'll see what I mean by that when we talk very briefly about the rules. The main principle that animates all of the government ethics rules is that you can't use your role as a public official to get a financial benefit or to avoid financial harm. And that applies whether you're at a Charter Review Committee meeting or not. And you'll see there's a lot of nuance to this. If the overarching principle slide has an asterisk on it, you know it's complicated, right? And so these rules can apply to financial benefit or avoiding financial harm for you, but it can also apply to relatives, members of your household, and a business with which you or a relative or member of your household is associated. All of those, of course, are defined terms. We don't have time to go into all of that tonight, but just understand if you are getting a financial benefit or avoiding financial harm because of your role here on the Charter Review Committee or in association with your role here on the Charter Review Committee, you may have a government ethics issue that you need to get more information about. I was going to talk about some of the specific rules like use of office. Excuse my cat just decided now was the time to stand up. So use of office, gifts, conflicts of interest. But I think, again, given our time constraints, I'm going to go ahead and skip through the slides I had on that. I'm happy to make these slides available and answer specific questions about those things. I will just pause briefly on this slide to note the state ethics law is enforced by the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, and they have a lot of great resources on their website for learning more about how those rules operate. Most specifically, this guide for public officials really tries to break the law down into more plain language and gives a lot of good examples and things like that. So that's a resource to check out to find out more about your obligations. And then If you have questions about those rules, you can contact the Ethics Commission. Just keep in mind, they're also the enforcement authority. So if you have an ethics question, you want to ask them before you take action, not after. Because if you call them after, you may be reporting your own violation. So call them before to find out. Of course, we can also be a resource on our county rules, which align pretty closely with the state law. There are some differences. So, you know, maybe if we have more time at another meeting, another night, we can talk about those a little bit more. I can spend maybe 10 minutes walking through those rules with you, but I want to move on to the questions that have come up tonight about some of the maybe more pressing issues that could come up. So let's talk briefly about public records law. There are two main aspects to Oregon's public records law. The first is that the public has a right to inspect public records unless an exemption applies, and there are many exemptions. And to facilitate that first part of the law on inspection, there's a second requirement to retain public records in a form that's retrievable so that people can inspect them. The county has a records retention schedule. The practice, as is common in most government institutions, is that you destroy records at the expiration of that schedule. Otherwise, you have records forever. And so as part of this inspection and retention requirement, you as now volunteers for a public organization need to understand what a public record is so you can understand what your obligations are around records that you create. So focus in on the bottom line of this slide. When in doubt, assume something is a public record that must be retained, because the definition is very broad. It's any writing in any form. Now, this is, of course, something only a lawyer could love, right? Any writing in any form includes a voicemail. Any writing can include a video, right? So it really should be more any media in any form, right? And this is broad. You see examples at the bottom: emails, notes. If you're taking notes right now, you may be creating a public record. Calendar entries, text messages. There's, think of this very, very broadly. So that's the first piece of it. And then it's anything that is relating to the conduct of the county's business and that's prepared, owned, used, or retained by a public body. So again, it's really about what the content of the record is and not where the record is located. So to the question earlier, what if it's in my personal email? It can still be a public record. Now, does that mean every email you've ever sent becomes a public record? No. Okay. The question for public records is the content, not the location. So if it relates to the county's business and it's in your personal email, it may be a public record that may be subject to disclosure. And so your obligation then is to retain those public records. So two things I just want to note here. The first is now that you know what a public record is and understand that it might be subject to disclosure, I just suggest that you be mindful in your creation of public records and think about if the thing that you're about to text someone or write down is something that you're comfortable being in the paper or being out in the world, because that is a possibility that a record you create could be disclosed and then published in the paper. The other thing is with volunteer committees like this, I often recommend that at the end of your service or during your service, if that's easier for you, consider turning your records over to the staff. That way they can handle that retention and production aspect of the record and take that obligation off of you. So if you want to collect all your notes at the end and hand them over to Polly, that can help alleviate some of that burden on you. So that is public records. And then public meetings law. So the rule for public meetings is that a quorum of the Charter Review Committee cannot meet in private to decide on or deliberate towards a decision. So what does that all mean? So first of all, what's a quorum? Generally, a quorum is a majority of the members of the group. And so that's our default right now. In future meetings, I think Kali is going to talk to you about adopting some bylaws, sort of setting your procedures. And in those bylaws, you can set a different quorum. Just understand that a quorum is the number of people that are required to be in a meeting to take any action. So if you set your quorum really high, for example, because you're thinking, well, then more of us can meet without triggering the public meetings law, you have to keep in mind that you've then also set a very high threshold for attendance in terms of being able to take action. The other thing to consider is that we're really looking at the spirit of the law here, right? And so what the courts have said is a meeting is not just when we're all in the same room or all in the same virtual room. There is such a thing as a serial public meeting. Well, it's typically not public, which is exactly the problem. So understand that for when there is a quorum of you meeting to deliberate or decide toward a decision, that needs to be done in public. Again, transparency, accountability. And so what the law requires when a quorum is meeting is that you have notice, that the public be able to attend, that you keep minutes, that it's accessible. And so it is challenging to meet those requirements if you're all communicating by email or you're all communicating in a shared document online, because how will the public know when to log on and see that you're making a change or communicating with each other? So our general advice on this is that you not engage in those kinds of serial communications if you've got a quorum on those communications. And so, for example, we recommend that when staff emails you that they BCC everyone so that there's not this temptation to reply all and start a discussion that could qualify as a meeting subject to the public meetings law. There are some exceptions to the requirements for public meetings law, to the requirement that you meet in public. That's for executive sessions, and it's only for very specific purposes that you would do with the advice of our office. So that's not something to rely upon. And even when you meet an executive session in private, you still have to give notice, you still have to keep minutes. So those same obligations apply. The last thing I'll note is, I've got social gatherings, dinner before the meeting. Obviously, these slides were originally built in a pre-pandemic time and built with the hope of someday returning to a time where we can gather in person. Just like public records law, public meetings law only applies when you're gathering information, deliberating, or making a decision. So if you all wanted to go out and, get dinner before the meeting, that would not be a meeting subject to public meetings law, as long as your conversation doesn't stray into those topics. And so you just want to be mindful of that, and also mindful of appearances. Even if you're having a completely social conversation, if a member of the public sees, hey, this looks like it's sort of a de facto charter review committee meeting, that could create issues. So you just want to be really mindful about that if we ever get back to the time when we're all gathering in person.
Catherine, it is unfortunately nearly 8 o'clock, so I think we're going to have to pause on some of these pieces.
That's the main pieces, so I'm good.
We'll potentially come back. I know that some of these things can freak everyone out, but Catherine is here, certainly, as she mentioned at the top of the meeting, as a support, and we can walk through more of these. I know that there's one question from Maya in the chat asking if anybody here submits a legal question that goes to Kali and then gets over to Catherine and the county attorney's office, can that be circulated with the other committee members? Yes, absolutely. If there's something that one of you bring up, whether it's related to legal things or just kind of charter in general, we'll make sure that those are circulated with all of you. So I'm going to do a really quick next steps for us. We've got about 1 minute. I'm going to drop into the chat a link to a Jamboard. If you've never used Jamboard, it's a Google tool. You can add sticky notes. It's really simple and easy to use. And that'll just be a little like hey, what worked and what didn't work? Fill it out after this meeting, fill it out over the next couple of days. I'll be checking in on it, and you can play around and maybe use a new tool, and let us know what worked tonight and what didn't. You can also get in touch. So if you have additional questions that weren't answered about charter review itself, about any of the legal pieces on serving as public officials, or anything else that you want to know, please send those to Kali. Kali is your point person for all of that. So she can make sure that those get answered and get sent to the right person. You should all have her contact information, but maybe Kali, we can drop your email in the chat just in case somebody lost it or they got like a new email. I don't know. So get in touch. We are going to be sending you some resources and probably some draft documents. Our next step is to really dive into your governance as a group. So how do you want to make decisions together? How do you want to hold space together? How do you want to, what are your group agreements that you want to uphold? So we will be sending you some things to review, but if you are really, really eager to do some homework, go read that final part of the charter that Kali mentioned that talks about governance, that talks about what you need to do as a charter review committee, and that'll help jumpstart our next conversation, which will be happening in October. Emails are in the chat, a link to this Jamboard, which is basically just like only fill it out if you want to, but like what worked, what didn't work. You can add little sticky notes for me and Kali and Danny to read. Fill that out at your leisure and get in touch if you have additional questions. It's 8:01. It is a privilege to be here with y'all. I'm so excited to dive in. I know that this kind of, it's like onboarding light, right? Like we're getting you up and running and learning more about the charter and the governance pieces and all that. But I think our next conversation is going to be a really fruitful one as we talk about how you want to make this process your own. You have a lot to decide. We're here to support you on this, but it's an exciting opportunity to really make sure that your values of equity, of racial justice and environmental justice are reflected in your process. So I'm super stoked for that. I can't wait to see you again. Get in touch. Bye. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everyone.